Do you really know how type 2 diabetes starts? Most people don't understand what early type 2 diabetes is and ignore the early signs of type 2 diabetes until the condition progresses. Understanding early type 2 diabetes is essential because the early warning signs are silent and appear before diagnosis. Today, I'm going to reveal what almost no one explains and how to prevent its progression.
When discussing early-stage type 2 diabetes, we need to answer an essential question. How does type 2 diabetes start? Most people believe the problem begins when blood tests show high glucose levels. But in reality, it all starts much earlier, with insulin resistance and early diabetes. Insulin resistance arises when the body's cells stop responding efficiently to insulin. To compensate, the pancreas begins producing more and more insulin to maintain seemingly normal blood sugar levels. During this period, tests may not appear alarming, and the person may not present clear symptoms of high blood sugar. However, metabolic health is already being silently compromised. This stage can last for years. The body is working overtime to maintain balance. But behind the acceptable numbers, the metabolic process is deteriorating. This is how early-stage type 2 diabetes develops. Not suddenly, but as a result of a progressive metabolic process. Insulin resistance is directly linked to metabolic syndrome, which involves increased abdominal fat, high blood pressure, cholesterol changes, and chronic inflammation. The connection between inflammation and diabetes is increasingly evident in the scientific literature, showing that an inflammatory environment further worsens insulin resistance. Over time, the pancreas begins to be unable to compensate. Blood sugar levels rise more frequently. A1C begins to increase, and the diagnosis finally appears. But it's important to understand that when early stage type 2 diabetes is identified, the process has already been underway for a long time. Understanding insulin resistance and early diabetes completely changes how we view the disease. It's not just about high blood sugar, but about a progressive failure in metabolic regulation. And the sooner we understand how type 2 diabetes starts, the greater the chances of intervening, protecting metabolic health, and preventing disease progression. When we talk about prediabetes versus early type 2 diabetes, many people believe there's a clear, definitive line between the two. But in practice, this transition is more gradual than it seems. Prediabetes is the stage where blood sugar levels are already above normal, but haven't yet met the formal criteria for diabetes. Early type 2 diabetes occurs when these values exceed the diagnostic threshold. But the metabolic process has been happening for a long time. Prediabetes symptoms are usually subtle or even non-existent. Some people experience mild high blood sugar symptoms, such as fatigue after meals, increased abdominal fat, difficulty losing weight, and increased hunger throughout the day. The problem is that these signs are easily ignored or attributed to stress and busy routines. It's common to see cases of newly diagnosed type 2 diabetes in people who, years before, already had tests showing subtle changes. When we analyze early diabetes lab results explained properly, we realize that small increases in A1C or fasting glucose already indicated that something was wrong. This data doesn't appear suddenly. They are part of a silent type 2 diabetes progression. The difference between prediabetes and early type 2 diabetes lies in the numbers. But the metabolic impact begins long before the official diagnosis. Understanding this is essential to avoid minimizing near-normal results. The goal is not to generate fear, but to raise awareness. The sooner we identify the signs and understand what the tests actually show, the greater the chances of halting the progression and protecting long-term metabolic health. If you've made it this far, it's because you know you can no longer treat diabetes as something simple or superficial. The truth is, the more you postpone change, the greater the risk of type 2 diabetes progression and future complications. The right information at the right time changes destinies, and not everyone is willing to learn that. At Health Insight MD, we delve into what truly controls blood sugar levels, improves metabolic health, and prevents diabetes from progressing. But this content is for those who want to act, not just those who want to listen. Subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications. Each video could be the missing piece you need to prevent progression and take control of your health. Don't put it off. Your decision today defines how your diabetes will be in the coming years. One of the biggest mistakes at the beginning of a diagnosis is believing that it's nothing. Yet, many people receive borderline results, a slightly elevated A1C or fasting glucose above the ideal, and go into denial. They think that because they don't feel intense symptoms, there's no urgency. But it is precisely at this moment that the process is already underway. Early type 2 diabetes rarely begins dramatically. It evolves silently, driven by glucose spikes and insulin resistance that repeat daily. These frequent glucose spikes force the body to produce more insulin, worsening resistance and making blood sugar control more difficult over time. Even when the numbers seem almost normal, the metabolism is already under stress. That's why preventing diabetes progression needs to start early. The concept of early intervention diabetes is powerful because the initial stage represents the greatest opportunity for real change. At this point, the body still responds very well to interventions. Reversing early type 2 diabetes is possible in many cases when there is consistency in lifestyle changes for early diabetes, including strategic diet, regular physical activity, and a focus on metabolic health. Many people believe they only need to take action when their medication dosage increases. This thinking is dangerous. The longer glucose spikes and insulin resistance remain uncorrected, the harder it becomes to regain metabolic balance. On the other hand, when a person takes control early, improves blood sugar control, and builds sustainable strategies, the impact is profound. The goal is not to generate fear, but awareness. The initial stage is the most powerful window for change. It's when long-term blood sugar control can be established most easily, drastically reducing the risk of future complications. Ignoring this phase allows the process to progress. Acting now is transforming the course of one's own health. If there's one thing that truly changes the future of diabetes, it's changing the focus. Instead of just looking at isolated numbers on the tests, we need to look at metabolic health as a whole. Early type 2 diabetes doesn't just start with elevated blood sugar levels. It starts with a deeper metabolic imbalance, usually linked to insulin resistance. Improving insulin sensitivity is one of the most powerful strategies in type 2 diabetes management. When the body responds better to insulin, blood sugar control becomes more stable, glucose spikes decrease, and the body stops working in constant compensatory mode. This reduces pancreatic overload and creates real conditions for long-term blood sugar control. Reducing diabetes risk factors is also an essential part of this process. Excess abdominal fat, sedentary lifestyle, chronic inflammation, and irregular eating habits fuel the insulin resistance cycle. By addressing these points, we're not just controlling sugar, we're attacking the metabolic cause that sustains the problem. This is where true chronic disease prevention begins. Controlling only the numbers can give a false sense of security. It's possible to have temporarily better test results while still maintaining active insulin resistance in the background. Therefore, the focus needs to go beyond the symptom and reach the root of the imbalance. When well managed, with consistent lifestyle changes, strategic nutrition, and regular exercise, the process can stabilize the condition and in many cases, allow for the reversal of early type 2 diabetes. The central point is this: early type 2 diabetes is not a definitive sentence. It's a warning sign from the body indicating that metabolic health needs immediate attention. It's an opportunity to act before type 2 diabetes progression advances to more complex and difficult to control stages. If you've recently been diagnosed with early type 2 diabetes or are trying to better understand your tests, this video may have brought clarity to what previously seemed confusing. Understanding how to improve blood sugar control, protect your metabolic health, and act before type 2 diabetes progression makes all the difference when it comes to long-term blood sugar control. If this content resonated with you, subscribe to the Health Insight MD channel. The goal here is to delve deeper into topics such as insulin resistance, diabetes risk factors, and real-world type 2 diabetes management strategies, always focusing on practical and applicable information. The idea is not just to talk about numbers, but about consistent and conscious transformation. If you've made it this far, leave a comment saying, "This message was from me," that way I know you're committed to understanding what truly changes the future of diabetes. And if, throughout the video, you realized you need to pay more attention to your metabolic health, also share your experience, whether it's a recent diagnosis, questions about tests, or difficulties with blood sugar control. This exchange strengthens everyone going through the same process. If this content helped you see early type 2 diabetes as a warning sign and not a death sentence, leave a like as if to say, this type of conversation needs to continue. This shows that it's worthwhile to bring in deeper analyses about preventing diabetes, progression, and real paths to reversing early type 2 diabetes when possible. And to continue advancing this understanding, there's a video here that complements this topic and delves even deeper into how to improve your blood sugar control and strengthen your metabolic health in your daily life. Click on it and continue with me there.